following program is intended for mature audiences.
You're listening to Basically a Sports Show.
Follow us on Twitter at Basically Sports.
Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes.
And download every episode and more at basicallyasportshow.com.
Now here's your hosts, Zach,
Greg,
Mike.
And this is Andy, and you're listening to Basically a Sports Show.
Since Zach is off on assignment in the mountains of California tonight, I can ask a couple wrestling questions to you guys without boring him to death. So what's the big draw for WrestleMania this year? Who are we looking at going into it? Like, what's the big storyline?
That's a fine question. If you were to ask wrestling fans, I mean, it's a fine question because I don't have the numbers with me here, but I think there are upwards of 8 very important wrestlers that are injured and will not be able to participate.
It's a shit show right now is basically what it is.
Really? It's a really good July pay-per-view card, but for the purposes of WrestleMania, WrestleMania and a venue that they are looking to set an attendance record in.
Yeah.
So it's a total disaster.
Yeah, it's the Jerry Dome. And I'm sure a lot of those seats are already sold. I don't think they're going to take a wash financially, but it could end up being really bad if on the day of the show there are empty seats. And if it's not too bad, they can hide that with camera angles, but
they don't want to have, they would prefer the place to be like the Astrodome in X7. Yeah, X7.
X7.
But now here's the interesting thing. So, we're sitting here talking about WrestleMania and attendance and the designs around the logo and the politics. I was talking about this with my roommate who is not a wrestling fan at all, doesn't even really like sports. And he'll occasionally catch me watching wrestling, and he's entertained by it. But he'll always comment that what a unique medium this is for entertainment compared to anything else. There's nothing else like it.
No,
except for soap operas on TV and stuff. It's the strangest combination of entertainment mediums, and what keeps fans engaged isn't so much what's on TV, older fans. Mm-hmm. It's more of the backstage, the politics, the real subplots of the actual people behind the characters. That is always more fascinating than
it is just like last year. I think nobody gave a shit about Roman Reigns. Mm-mm. But I think the draw wasn't will Roman Reigns beat Brock Lesnar, but the draw was will the company have the balls to try to make Roman Reigns a champion at WrestleMania?
Right, because the predetermined nature of all these matches is what's baffling. So so let's say the NFL, in some alternate universe, the NFL is completely scripted. And you'd obviously, you go into the playoffs. It's it's nice to see that the Bengals were featured in the playoffs this year because, that team really deserves a push. Mm-hmm. They kind of have a heel thing going, but they could maybe go to a turn babyface, give or take this or that. But obviously the Patriots are the champion heels. Mm. And so, a good NFL script would feature the Patriots getting into the championship game against some, upstart team I don't know, pick a team from
the Texans.
The fucking Texans. Why not? The scrappy heart of gold Texans, even though they're not quite that. And then obviously you'd want the good guys, the underdog that has the fans rallying against this evil entity to win. So put that in terms of the WWE, where it's okay, so they've set it up to where they've got this bad guy and a good guy, but the bad guy all the people like, and the good guy everybody hates. Mm-hmm. Total contradiction. It's a fucking mess, and that's what it's so fascinating. And Mike, I'm sure, could elaborate in much clearer terms that how confusing is it to be a company like WWE to where it's okay, we've got this guy, he's a bad guy, nobody should like him because he's bad. And we've got this good guy who is really handsome and everybody doesn't really like, but we're going to treat him like the good guy. It's
again, last year at the main event of WrestleMania, I think everyone in that arena was cheering for. I mean, hell, they were counting along with Lesnar's suplexes in that title match, and Roman Reigns, who was like the good guy, people just couldn't stand. Companies have dealt with it various ways. WCW just flat out ignored the crowd, and that's probably why they're not in business anymore. At least WWE pays them lip service from now and then just to keep them from completely revolting.
But the point is, when you have ultimate control over the product to where you control every outcome, obviously at the biggest show of the year, of the Super Bowl of professional wrestling, you want the ending and the payoff to be just absolutely enormous. You want the last 3 or 4 months of television to build and build towards this ultimate climax. But what's happened this year is that's very unique is that everybody's hurt. That matters. There's a few guys left that are consequences. But it's the first time in maybe ever that so many key people have been injured, and a show has been so derailed. And I'm half interested to see if they can salvage the product and turn things around. I'm half interested because I just kind of want to see it burn.
You know what? I know that around this time last year they were talking about how Sting might have another match at like 32, and obviously that hasn't panned out. I mean, he's done some stuff, but I think Sting's done. Yeah, and he probably should be done, honestly, at his age. But it wouldn't surprise me if they dragged him out of retirement because, like, we need names people know.
I was going to ask, would they do that? You know, because I mean, I'm a big Undertaker fan. Now, he's well past his prime, but I don't know anybody past that. Like, you know, stars that are maybe still around. You know, maybe a little too old, but still you're going to have to bring back. Are they going to do something like that? You think?
Well, the rumor was for a little while earlier this year that Stone Cold Steve Austin would have one final match.
Oh, that'd be kind of cool.
They kind of did a tease for it on the WWE Network special type thing, but ultimately it was just a bit of, I don't know if it was a joke or just some sort of setting the table for something that was never approved. But he never got a goodbye match, and so a lot of people figured this would be the place to do it. It's in his home state, but that never worked out. I mean, he's retired. He's got a history of knee and neck injuries, so it's just not the right deal. But this year, the main thing, I guess, would be The Undertaker retiring, be his last match. Mm-hmm. But anyone they were going to have him fight, like John Cena is the key name, and he could potentially wrestle, but John Cena got hurt. He had a shoulder dislocation?
Yeah, Cena's out.
But he may come back in time. They're going to chance it, I think.
He could, but I mean, I don't know. That would just seem so terrible. Like it's the Undertaker's last match. Give it some proper build up, right? I mean,
a month is not enough, or 6 weeks.
No,
yeah, because they would basically have to just bring him in now, right, and start promoting it.
Yeah, I mean he's been working off and on the calendar year.
Oh, cool.
Completely unexceptional work. I mean, it's not good. I mean, the guy's, I think he's pushing 50, maybe.
He's damn close. Yeah.
I mean, he still puts on a good show every now and then, but it's just.
I honestly would have had him go out after the Lesnar match at 30. Just like
that was the one he lost, right?
Yeah.
And that match too had a crappy build up, and
the only reason people remember that match is because Lesnar won. The build up was shitty. The match was shitty mostly because Undertaker couldn't move, but it was the ending that.
Plus, I mean, as much as I love Undertaker's gimmick, it's kind of really passe now, isn't it? I mean, compared to the new storylines that they do in WWE. Like
he's a relic from the early 90s.
Yeah.
Goofy shit like that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how well that I mean, I think it's cool, but, that's because I was digging on it, 20 years ago.
People accept it now because it's The Undertaker, but if you try to introduce... And the closest you got was Bray Wyatt, and people were really into Bray Wyatt for the longest time until.
And they're still into it.
No, they still are. They still are. But he definitely had. There was definitely a point where he was just right on that. I think he was on the main event level, and
briefly,
and if they had just let him go over, I think if they had let him go over Cena at WrestleMania 30, he'd be right in the main event discussion right now.
Well, for as much as we say, in wrestling, wins and losses are, it doesn't, by having them be predetermined, you kind of reduce the value of what they mean. A person's record is so useless. But fans aren't stupid. And if you continue to watch these guys, like, well, I like Bray Wyatt. He's an interesting character. But he keeps losing and losing and losing. I can't honestly tell you. I think he's maybe won 3 matches out of the probably 100 he's had this year. Mm-hmm. And especially on a big stage where you'd think that they'd finally want to give him some help, but they only want to do one guy at a time, and it's this whole. I'm telling you, Greg, if you honestly got into wrestling, you wouldn't even have to watch much of the product anymore, because all you have to do is follow the kind of the IWC, the Internet Wrestling Community, which is okay, but you can also read the books. There's so much fascinating material out there.
Sex, Lies, and Headlocks is probably the book I'd recommend. It cuts off a bit. It cuts off around the end of the Attitude Era, because it's about 10 years old, but it's still pretty good.
Well, see, I
like the history of everything.
When I was still kind of half following it, I mean, like Andy was talking about with the storylines and all that, I enjoyed that way more than the matches. Even the produced storylines, I got a bigger. I mean, the matches were cool, but I liked, say, I'll use the Undertaker as an example. Okay, they're trying to, they're building up towards a match at WrestleMania or at a pay-per-view, and you would get these little snippets where they would fight, almost fight and that kind of stuff. That's what I got into. I mean, the matches were cool, but to me, it was all the stuff that went on around it that I got the biggest kick out of. And that's what I thought was neat. So it appeals to a sorry to interrupt, but it appeals to a very base human interest in storytelling. Yeah, it's it's your straight up good guy versus bad guy thing. And I was going to go back to Roman Reigns for a second. I mean, they put him in position to be like the next big thing, but nobody wanted it, right? The
thing is that you can't create the next big thing.
But they tried really hard with Reigns, didn't they?
Fans are they certainly tried, but fans are smart, and fans kind of don't like being dictated to. Okay, when Hogan hit it big, Vince obviously wanted him to be the next big thing, but because the product was so different, it's not like he was shoved down anyone's throats. They just sort of had Hogan, they brought him in, and then they just knew the right time to let him do his thing, and he took off. So it was planned, but at the same time, it was very subtle. Austin, who was their next big thing, because there was sort of a dark age in between there, but Austin,
come on, man.
Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, those.
Go ahead.
But Diesel, we can't forget Diesel. But Vince didn't want Austin to be the next big thing. Vince hired Austin to be a mid-card guy, and Austin kind of took off on his own accord. He kind of did his own thing, and back then the company was smart enough to say, "Oh shit, we've got this guy who's electrifying the crowd. Let's run with him." So. Austin wasn't the plan, but they called an audible when he became what the fans wanted. And last time that happened was Daniel Bryan, and then they kind of fumbled that football too. So
he's also been in the news because of his retirement, and I don't know. It's a unique time. So and I mean, we can kind of if we're spending too much time on wrestling, we can move on.
I'm cool with it. Who was the guy? I can't think of his name now. He was. Come on! Run a couple big names past me over the past few years. I can't think of his name now. The guy with
Punk.
That's him. Yeah, CM Punk. What is he still around?
No,
he's UFC.
Oh, okay. So he's doing
he's training to be in UFC. I don't think he's actually had a fight yet.
Okay, yeah. But no, I just can't believe that they're serious. I mean, when I said The Undertaker coming back for WrestleMania, I didn't think it was an actual possibility.
Well, yeah, he's been coming back every year.
Well, I know, but because I watched, the year he lost to, what's his name? Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
I watched that match, and I got to be honest, it was just like, this is not the guy that I was a fan of,
Well, hell no. Yeah. I mean, he got concussed early in the match and was just kind of just dead ass the whole time.
Yeah.
And he's also just not in the best shape. I mean, he's an older guy. He's been, wrestling for the majority of his life, and it takes its toll,
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Well, wrestling is a lot of fun.
All right. So, see, we got a good, 25 minutes of wrestling in here, and Zach didn't fall asleep, and we're good. Yeah.
I was reading earlier today about what people used to watch on Discovery Channel. And I couldn't believe it, because I was like, those are actual shows. Those are topical to almost like a National Geographic-y kind of, audience. And then I kind of thought to myself, like that's a time like that time in the world, that time in our media world is going to be, that was lightning in a bottle. Like there was only a certain time. There's a beautiful golden era of cable TV where each network played what its name what its namesake was. So you had MTV had music, and Discovery Channel had sort of this wild kind of jungle safari type stuff. History Channel showed history stuff. It was like,
I got so much to say about History Channel.
That's sure, but I mean, like, whereas now, like Discovery, History, virtually all networks are reality networks now.
Yep.
There are no definitions. So like when you create a new network, for example, the Outdoor Life Network, basically all that means is for the hours which we are off the air with our normal typical crap, we're going to have fishing shows on. like there's a very loose amount of general content they have to run initially because it was cheap, and then as they grow viewership, they'll slowly weed out the cheap stuff that got them viewership and invest in stuff that retains viewership from the larger demographic they're trying to reach, which is just filth and just slop in television.
It's absolutely disgraceful. I mean, people like to joke about the History Channel, about how it used to be the Hitler Channel, right? Because it was all World War II stuff. And I remember back then that's when they showed, and it definitely was repetitive to an extent that everything was World War II centric, but at least if you go back and watch some of those old programs, they were at least historical. I mean, they were focused on the World War II thing, but they were at least quality educational historic programs. And then they started weaving in Nostradamus bullshit.
Oh my God, yeah.
And then there was, of course, the aliens.
Well, I'm okay with the aliens.
and then Monster Quest, and then the bottom really fell out when they introduced what was it? What is it? Axemen, Ice Road Truckers, those shows.
Yeah, and then you had Pawn Stars.
Pawn Stars is the absolute worst. Pawn Stars is absolute bullshit, and I know this because my dad loves Pawn Stars, and he keeps telling me that I should like it because it's history.
I suppose, sort of.
No, it's not. The few times that they actually try to touch on actual history, they get it wrong. Some guy brought in an old U.S. rifle, and it was from the War of 1812. So he brings in this rifle to the pawn shop, and the guy, one of the idiots who works at the pawn shop, takes it, and he's like, "Oh, the War of 1812. This was an interesting war because France had to come save our ass in that one." And no. France wasn't involved in the War of 1812. France had nothing to do with the War of 1812. I don't know where.
It's just I mean, but that's the thing, and I think calling it the golden age of cable, that's perfect because it was at a point there, everything was really good. The History Channel did history, Discovery did discovery stuff, like it was either nature stuff, or they would do stuff about space and that. I mean, it was really cool.
It was driven like there was a time, believe it or not, in like my grandkids would never believe me, but there was a time when people actually did not mind watching informational, educational television programming. You would watch television to be informed and learn and simultaneously be entertained. And while maybe not 100% of it was of good quality or production-wise very effective, it was nonetheless still good. It was still enriching somehow. Whereas now it is just all any audiences seem to want to watch anymore are people being assholes to one another and making asses of themselves, and all while having sex with one another. In between that, they will advertise and shill as many products as possible, and it's just it is spread across every network.
Oh yeah,
every single it's the prime show is always some reality crap.
I call it there, but for the grace of God, go I television, because that's basically what it is. And yeah, it's terrible. You could even say that about the sports networks. I mean, ESPN at one point was more focused on sports than they are now. I think
that's one of the oldest narratives of this podcast. Is,
I'd say ESPN went at some point, and I don't know when exactly that was, but we've talked about it before. But
right,
they went from being a source of news for sports to making news themselves.
And what I was going to bring up is that, and then we got Fox Sports 1, which was supposed to be an alternative to ESPN and go back to being about information and journalism. And guess what? Fox Sports 1 hired the guy that brought the quote-unquote embrace debate thing to ESPN. So now you've got Fox Sports 1 just trying to be a poor man's version of ESPN. So, but back to the regular stuff. I mean, because we've covered the ESPN thing a million times. But yeah,
it's frustrating just because we're also in a transitive time. So I had a kind of a cathartic moment the other weekend, just watching the Super Bowl, and I don't have cable. I haven't had cable in over a year, and I don't miss it. I just have this antenna thing, and just screw it into the back of my TV. And I mean, I watched the Super Bowl from pillar to post, not one breakup, HD, crystal clear, perfect quality. And I didn't pay a damn cent for it except for the hardware necessary to view it. So, and that's just one thing. Local cable stations are able to pump out HD quality programming for free over the air. That's one thing. Part two, obviously, is the longer story that hasn't been completely told yet, which is the era. We are in the era of cable cutters, and eventually it's going to catch up to sports. I don't know how, but they're already trying new things, and the NFL is. I'm wondering how they're going to handle it because the NFL can go anywhere they want to. They make so much money that whatever they touch turns to gold. But there are a lot of big cable networks that are extremely beholden to them because they require the NFL to achieve the ratings and advertising rates that they want. So when the NFL is like, hey, we're going to stream this game for free on Yahoo with a single sponsor, I bet that pissed a lot of people off.
Oh, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Because not only was it for free, more or less, but it was outstanding quality. It was almost universally celebrated, oh my god, that was great. I wish they would do this all the time. And when the NFL hears that kind of stuff, it's very encouraging to them. And I'm sure that that's going to happen more and more. There's going to be more and more of these games. It wouldn't surprise me if Thursday Night Football at some point is put on some sort of permanent streaming basis for right now. But at some point, there will be a reckoning for sports either going to their own networks that are online, much like going full circle here to WWE, getting completely off of the cable thing. I don't know who will be first, but eventually it'll happen.
I mean, I can watch when I got my PS4, it came with, apps pre-installed into it for me to watch the NHL and NBA. I can only use them if I pay for subscriptions for those services. But if I were to do that, I wouldn't need cable to see either the NBA or NHL. So the software is already out there.
Oh yeah,
it's available, and I mean there's got to be some sort of moment where these these big sports organizations realize hey, we're losing a lot of money because our viewers are under a certain age or a particular demographic are no longer watching us on their TVs in their living rooms. They would rather not pay for cable and stream it to their computers via some illegal method. And, the music industry figured it out. And, for a few years there in the late 90s, early 2000s, people in that industry were falling apart because they thought, oh, well, here's the reckoning. Here it comes, the apocalypse of music because, people aren't willing to pay for anything now. And that wasn't the case. That was a very big lesson learned for a lot of people was that there's always going to be a part of the population that'll steal your product if they can. But there are any number of those people who are willing to pay a reasonable price to get it in the best quality and to pay to support the artist and all that stuff. The NFL needs to address that at some point, as well as all the big four. But it's a real thing. It's a real thing. And eventually, I'm looking for it'll be in probably the next decade, probably.
I was going to say, you got to look at it from a demo standpoint. So we're probably next time around, like the kids that are between say 12 and 18 right now, and maybe up like to their mid-20s, but when they get into the position, you're right. It's probably, I would say, 15 years, and it's going to be a completely different landscape. You won't even recognize it compared to what it's like today, because you're just going to get every year more and more people. I mean, I'm much older than that demo, and I've practically cut cable at this point. Everything I watch is either on Netflix or on my computer, and I don't really like if I want to see something on the History Channel, I watch it on demand. I don't even use it hardly, and I'm hardly the demo that, I'm not the young demo, so it's just a matter of time.
No. I mean, just speaking of streaming in general, between Netflix and Shomi, I don't even need – I don't need cable, period.
Yeah, and if you want to go, you've got Netflix, and if you want to watch the current stuff that's on television, there's Hulu, which still has commercials, but if you pay, I think it's $11.99 a month as opposed to $7.99, you can watch that commercial free. So it's a matter. I'm going to be curious to see how the sports handle it, because I mean the NFL, the bulk of their money. I mean, what made it so huge is the broadcasting rights fees.
Yeah, but I think they've eclipsed that right now. Like, who needs who the most? Does the NFL need the broadcasters? Do the broadcasters need the NFL?
I think the broadcasters need the NFL.
Absolutely.
I think that if any league is going to be the one to be the first one out the gate, I think it's going to be the NFL, because they have the financial stability to take the risk.
Maybe I actually personally I think it's going to be baseball that'll do it, because there's each team is several of them. Like I know that the Cubs are going to have their own network aiming for 2020, and the Yankees. Don't they? They already have them.
They have you've got the Yankees have the Yes Network. The Indians, believe it or not, had their own network, and then Fox Sports bought the network back.
Yeah.
And now they have two channels, but there's the Yankees. I want to say, I think the Dodgers and Angels are headed in that direction, or debuting if they haven't already. There's a few, and it's just, I mean, like with me with baseball, I watch it on my iPad through the MLB TV subscription. I don't even watch it on TV anymore.
But if they had, and I'm going back to the NHL, for example, because mostly that would take the least amount of effort because that app's already in my gaming system. But if they put out a service where I just had to pay a reasonable fee, a reasonable annual fee, yeah, I'd watch all of my NHL through that. Especially depending on how varied it is, because good God, Canadian hockey broadcasting these days since Rogers took over has not been the greatest. So.
Well, don't you get NHL Center Ice up there?
We got if you want to pay for it, yeah. You got to.
Well, that's also those are tricky. So what we're talking about, some people are going to be like, "Oh, that's the NFL Red Zone or whatever their
Sunday ticket, yeah,
Sunday ticket, or that's Center Ice or whatever." Well, yeah, but that is up until you want to watch the teams in your market, and then they black that stuff out. Mm-hmm. That whole thing needs to go away.
Yes,
that local black art, they are losing money hand over fist doing that because of some archaic, if they have it there, they won't come to the ballpark type thing.
That's a relic from the 60s, that blackout thing. And it makes no sense in this day and age. I just got an email from Major League Baseball, the MLB TV thing. I think that starting this year, baseball is eliminating the blackouts. Good. So you can watch, if you've got the service, the subscription service, you can watch whoever you want. Whether, for me now, I guess it would be probably the Marlins or the Rays, I guess, but I can watch them or anybody else. So the blackout thing is just absurd. Are you
gonna add those two to your growing list of favorite teams, Greg?
I don't know. I have a Marlins jersey. My brother bought me for Christmas, so I might. I don't know.
I wanted to bring this up with Mike real quick. So I was watching the Blackhawks and the Maple Leafs game the other day.
Wow, what a great uniform matchup that is, man.
Oh, it was beautiful.
the thing I was wondering about, because I was watching with the Canadian, the TSN feed.
Okay.
And I was kind of blown away. It sounded almost Cleveland-esque. Like, in terms of, like, I don't know of any broadcast, and it was in their own kind of Canadian way of, like, okay, so a lot of people in Cleveland, and Greg could probably vouch for this, nobody hates Cleveland sports more than people who live in Cleveland. But it was almost like they talked about several Blackhawks players who were like Toronto-born or Canadian-born, and it was just like another Canadian come back to haunt the Maple Leafs here.
Oh yeah,
like,
that you get that all the time.
Like it's an act of treachery. Like they did it like freezing.
Yeah. That's about right.
That is very Cleveland-esque, actually. That the whole coming back to haunt us type thing.
Oh yeah, hell, just catch some Don Cherry diatribes about how what it takes the Leafs to improve. You know, it's like
sure.
So Don, what do you think the Leafs need to do to turn things around? Well, they need to get some good Ontario boys in there, and it's like, oh god, god.
Like, I'd expect it coming from him, but from the TSN crew in the game, they were almost like they spoke positively of it. Now, here's the other thing. So, they kind of were deriding Canadians for not being – well, it was almost like they're deriding the Maple Leafs for not bringing in enough Canadian talent from that, made successful on other teams. But they were also – they also sounded – it reminded me a lot of Bears fans. And I kind of realized, like, the Maple Leafs are kind of like the Bears of hockey.
Yeah,
sometimes
we are.
Good. Their fans are really loyal and just want so badly for there to be success, but God, do they just always suck. And
they get way more support. The support from the fans to the actual joy received proportion is way off. Yeah.
Now there's this whole thing about, like, they were talking very optimistically. It's like, hey, well, the pieces are there. They got a great coach and all this stuff. And I was like, well, that sounds very familiar. But there's stuff that just it weirds me out about, like, we've discussed this on the show a million times about, it's just fan logic and just sort of why we keep coming back. And I was trying to think about this in terms of the Browns, and I mean the Browns, for as much as I don't think any of us really care about them, or just the people, NFL fans in general, I just don't know how they have fans left. I don't know how they do it, and
that's a good question.
And Cleveland sports in general has just suffered just in this hell of not having anything nice. And when they get something nice, like the original LeBron run, they just eat it alive and they spit it out. And it's not necessarily the fault of the city or the fans, but it's just like things just don't work out. They just don't work out. And, I don't know why. But if I lived in Cleveland and I had to come back every season and just like, hope is dead, optimism cannot reign, and every year it's just something.
I think I can explain that a little bit. Believe it or not, now this goes back to more with the original Browns and the new ones, because as I've said a million times, I never was able to connect with the new Browns like I did the old ones. Mm-hmm. But then again, the old Browns weren't just horrifically bad. But every year, no matter how bad things were, you would look at it and go, like you said, okay, we've got a good coach, there's a couple players here, you never know. And you'd be amazed at how many times you will come back to keep getting punched in the mouth before you finally just go, I can't take it anymore.
It got to that point, I think, in Toronto last season, where you had fans throwing their jerseys onto the ice after losses.
I thought that was I thought the Oilers, that was an Oilers thing.
Now, possibly, but it was also very much a Leafs thing.
And across Canada, people were just hurling their stuff on.
And people were just upset. And, no surprise, the next, that offseason, as soon as that season's over, go out, get Babcock. And I think as far as the Leafs go, I think that's what has got a lot of people hopeful right now.
Yeah.
They've got Babcock. They've got a proven coach, and they've got Mike Shanahan. Lou Lamoriello is a bit of an interesting guy, but again, he did build some Cup winners with New Jersey, so he at least in theory knows what he's doing. The big thing is that we've got competent people in high positions, and they've made moves to kind of free up some cap and roster spots. They got rid of Phil Kessel. Dion Phaneuf got sent to the Senators. They got Ottawa to take on his cap hit, so that freed up $7.25 million in cap space. And so I think I think from a Leafs fan's perspective, being very much sort of this team that's stuck in this limbo of hopelessness, at least right now, the perception seems to be, well, at least management is making an effort and
has all the trappings of a competent franchise.
Exactly.
I was going to go off of that for a second. With the Cubs, Andy, we could see the Cubs were headed in the right direction. You knew it a few years ago. You're like, okay, this team, they're putting pieces in place. And I think in baseball and hockey, it's a little easier to see it, and it's a little more certain. In football, with the Browns, we've seen teams that all of a sudden they get good, and we've seen teams fall apart that were good. And I think with the Browns, it's just like you keep seeing it, and you go, this could be the time, and it never, ever is. And that's, I think, what the difference is. I don't understand why they have fans either, but with the Leafs, I get it, and because you've got pieces in place, and it's a more long-term thing you can see.
Browns just keep firing people and start over, and they'll give them a year or two, then fire them and start.
Maybe if the Browns kept someone for longer than 2 years in a coaching or management position, they could get some continuity.
But they're not hiring Babcock here; they're hiring just turds of coaches.
Well, who did they hire this time around? It was Action Jackson or somebody. I can't remember his name, but
Ray something. It was Bengals defense or Hugh Jackson.
Hugh Jackson, that's it. Yeah,
formerly of Oakland and Cincinnati, and he's he's potentially just what they need. So
he has a history of dealing with struggling franchises run by asshole owners. So
did you guys? This is kind of off kilter a little bit, but I want to discuss before I forgot it. So I read a little bit about Peyton Manning today. And,
I wanted to talk about Peyton Manning today.
So I want to personally get out there that no, I don't like Peyton Manning very much. I never have. I haven't never bought into this oh, I'm just an aw shucks good guy. I'll make you laugh. You can have a beer with me. I'm just good-natured and kind of stupid-looking. So, but, man, I was on SNL that one time, and I was so funny. God, why don't y'all just drink a Budweiser and order a Papa John's? This guy cheated on his wife in Indy. He was an ass in college, and now he was an ass when he wrote his autobiography. And now, for some reason, 15 years later, a lot of this stuff is kind of boiling to the surface about maybe this guy isn't as good of a guy as we think he is. Mm-hmm. I think it would be a good time for him to walk away.
I do too. Okay. I've never liked Peyton Manning for a lot of the same reasons you just outlined, Andy. It just, to me, the whole good old boy culture of the NFL in general has always pissed me off. And Peyton Manning just seemed to be the absolute epitome of that. And one of the reasons why him going to Denver was so infuriating, because to me, John Elway is like the patriarch of that whole mentality. And he just found another fucking schmuck to go along with him on that. And I think I think they were despicable soulmates in that regard. But and yeah, I'm pissed off the Broncos won the Super Bowl, but you know what? At least anyone who actually watched that game will know that, Peyton Manning didn't do shit. Congratulations, Denver's defense. You've somewhat legitimized Peyton Manning's legacy. But no offense, Andy, always great to have you back, but I kind of wish Zach was here just so I could – I knew it!
Zach's going to hear this show and he's going to be like, "Oh my God, 20 minutes of wrestling and now they're beating up on Peyton Manning."
He'll be long gone before the Peyton Manning.
Yeah, no, he would have tuned out by the rest.
Yeah, that's true.
Tuned out by now.
Yeah, he stopped listening 20 minutes ago, so we don't have to worry about it.
We can talk shit about him if we want to, and now's the time.
I've never been really one way or the other on Peyton Manning. I don't hate him. He's never been one of my favorite players either. But I will say that like an idiot, I bought the whole "aw shucks, he's just a good guy" type of thing. So I had no idea that this sexual harassment story had been around for as long as it had been around.
Not only is it a case of sexual harassment, but he pretty much destroyed the career of someone who, by all accounts, did not deserve it. It's just
Well, and that's the thing too when you look at it, and this is one that made it all the way to a lawsuit, which immediately makes me wonder. I don't think that people just one day go, I think I'll give sexual harassment a try just this one time, and then I won't do it ever again. I don't think that's the way it works. So now you immediately start wondering, well, what the hell else has he done over the years? So,
like, the story, I mean, I will admit, I mean, on the surface it sounds pretty funny compared to, like, you know, like Bill Cosby or something. I mean, it's comical. But, I mean, virtually Peyton Manning committed some pretty ridiculous sexual harassment type stuff, and he was a trainer, basically?
Yeah.
Athletic trainer.
I think University of Tennessee.
Yeah.
And I like how they scientifically describe this here. He showed off his gluteus maximus, rectum, the testicles, in the area in between the testicles. It was his taint, folks. He put his taint and his dick and balls on her, like, face, I guess.
Yeah, on her face.
And alleged that he was mooning somebody, and in the act of mooning, his
fell.
Gooch and groin landed in this poor woman's face. So, you know, that in and of itself is, if it was a guy, and this wouldn't even be a thing. But because it's a woman, you've obviously crossed the line. And people called him out on it, and obviously he was part of a lawsuit, and Peyton Manning didn't get in trouble. There was an out-of-court settlement, and both of them agreed to sign an NDA, from what I understand.
Yeah.
And so then years later, Peyton's writing a 2001, I guess it was autobiography.
With his dad.
With Archie Manning.
Right.
And for some reason, they figure, you know what, we should just talk about this because to hell with her. And they talk about it and paint her to be this awful, like she was just this, like basically defamed her character. And so violating the NDA. And so he's gotten letters from teammates and people who totally witnessed the situation and know the truth of the matter, and just imploring him to just, like, Peyton, you know, come on, just apologize, make good on this because you're better than this. And honestly, if Peyton Manning came out today, if he had a press conference tomorrow and said, hey, folks, you know, back I was 19 years old and I made some bad decisions then. I made some bad decisions in my book, and I've called her and I've talked with her. We've, you know, agreed to let this thing go, and I'm going to donate X money to this charity of her choice.
Going to donate all my chicken parmesan nationwide money.
Drink a Budweiser beer here in recognition of, you know, the hatchet we've just buried. Like, basically, if he came out there and fell on the sword completely, people would be like, oh my God, what a hero. Like, he's totally just, he's green, you know, man, he's admitting his mistakes. He's humanized now. And instead, he's probably just not going to say anything. He's probably just hoping to go well.
I think what he's going to do is exactly what he did in the book. It seems to me like they can't just walk away from something without having the last word.
That whole relationship that Archie Manning has with his children, just how uncomfortably domineering of a presence he's been in both of their careers since they both respectively got to the NFL, has been just absolutely, it's just been creepy in a way, and the fact that he's involved in all of this does not surprise me.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
And yet again, it doesn't. And I don't know. I want to say it doesn't surprise me. Maybe I am surprised to a degree, but it feels. There is a degree. I do feel a degree of vindication to be able to say I never liked this guy, and now it turns out he's kind of a horrible person. So,
do you guys think that with him being Peyton Manning, and let's be honest about it, every network that has NFL football is going to fall all over themselves to try to get him in the booth as soon as he says he's retired? I think that a lot of these, like, the networks have been kind of quiet on this. I mean, they haven't not covered it, but I think if this had been any other player, this thing would be a lot bigger than it's become already. I'm just curious to see how it's going to play out, because it seems to me, if it's Peyton Manning, I just don't think they want to have his name sullied.
Can you imagine if this broke a year ago in the middle of the NFL's hell season?
Oh, well, we joked about it during that hell season. The worst thing that could happen would be if Peyton Manning, blah, blah, blah. Well, we're a couple years late, but it happened. I don't know. Like I said, I was surprised by it because I really did buy the whole package. I thought he was just this, big, goofy fuck that, happened to play football pretty well.
I mean, I will give him credit. It takes a lot of talent and ability to be as marketable and as endearing to people as he has been. And, he's not stupid. He's invested very wisely in everything he's done with his finances and with his as far as his external persona.
So the amount of money he's gotten from Nationwide and Papa John's, he better damn well have taken care of his finances. I don't know.
And he used to be. Remember, he did all the pitches for DirecTV for years, and he might still do them for all I know.
Mm-hmm.
The list of his endorsements just goes on and on and on. It's just going to be. I just think he's going to be. They're going to deflect it. I don't think you're going to see a lot come of this. Which maybe there's nothing there, but if there is, and no one does anything, that's going to be terrible too.
Well, he hasn't. I feel like he's got to say something before the inevitable retirement press conference because that's obviously going to be built as a very emotional and powerful event because obviously it's a legend Hall of Famer guy who's walking away from the game. If it's anything like his Indianapolis departure, which was pretty intense, he's not going to have to field questions about whether he shoved his taint into a woman's face. During this period of time when he's trying to say goodbye to the game. Then again, he may wait. He may put everything on the back burner until probably maybe as late as July, is when it becomes fairly obvious that, he's not going to report to camp. And I'm sure Elway will do everything in his power to just be like, listen, Peyton, we'll just make this thing go away. Oh, I don't know if it's just me, by the way, this total side point. When I was watching John Elway up there with the championship ceremony or whatever, I look at Elway, man, and his face, I feel like Zach's going to look just like him. and I don't know what it is, man, but maybe he doesn't like Zach doesn't have as big a teeth, obviously, but like I feel like they have the same kind of smile, same kind of face, and it's not an insult to either of them. Well, I just feel like it's like, man, I could totally see Zach's voice coming out of that guy. And I'm sorry, I swear, I'm not insulting Zach at all. Like Zach,
no, it's just funny.
I just look like, man, like damn, like Elway, this looks like Zach. It's crazy.
I think Elway's got a better arm.
No problem.
Yeah, I never thought about it, but you're right. They do kind of resemble each other, don't they?
A little bit. I mean, if Zach fell asleep in a tanning bed for and that was probably, it kind of cooked like bacon and became orange like Elway is. But, I mean, I guess they're both from California, right? I mean,
yeah.
So there it is.
Maybe Zach is,
lost nephew or something.
Yeah, something along those lines. I don't know. It is kind of too bad that he's not here for this because Peyton Manning is Zach's all-time favorite football player. So I've got to wonder what this must be like for him.
Zach, I like Zach a lot, and I feel like he's always very colorful to talk to because he's like me. He's very emotionally invested in sports sometimes to the point of recklessness, and so I saw he was in Chicago the other day. I don't know why. I guess just to see a game. I don't know.
Yeah, his mom lives in Illinois, I think, and I think part of this, he had his birthday last week, and I think that was all part of the whole birthday celebration. But him and his grandfather, they've been to they did a Canadian thing last year, right, Mike? Where they went to Montreal and Ottawa.
Montreal and Ottawa, yeah.
Yeah, and I know he's been to.
Didn't we just do a show where he was like around? He was kind of doing a big trip.
Yeah. I know he's been all over the place. I mean, he's got a pretty good life going out there in California.
His Instagram is pretty fun to keep up with. But he was in Chicago for the other day for a Ducks-Hawks game, which the Ducks won. And I told him on Facebook, I'm like, get out and never come back. So I just posted a little thing from Lord of the Rings, Wow, I'll never come back. So. But anyway,
I wonder if he had a good time. Well, they won, so he must have had a pretty good time.
Is he hunting Bigfoot this weekend or something, or today? Or?
I don't know. He just said he was going to be in the mountains over the weekend, and I'm like, okay.
Maybe he killed somebody. He's got to get rid of the body.
Probably, yeah.
So get out of town while the heat's too high.
By the way, I think ever since this is totally off base, but I mean, hell with it. I was just finishing, like last 6 months ago, I finished up watching, there's of course 2 seasons of True Detective. Season 2 is meh, season 1 is great. But I feel like there's a lot of shows, I don't know if it's just a wave of programming, but there seems to be a lot of like documentaries that are getting big, like Making a Murderer.
Yeah, did you see that? I haven't seen it, but I've heard it's pretty good.
Craig. Jesus, what are you doing? Go watch. Just stop doing the show now and go watch Making a Murderer.
I'll give it another 20 minutes and I'll go watch it. It's on Netflix. I can watch it whenever I want.
It's the first 5 episodes or so are gold. The final 5 are just depressing, but also good.
Okay.
But excellent program from Netflix. Excellent.
You know what I started watching, which I was kind of surprised at the quality, was the FX is doing that. What was it? The People versus O.J. Simpson. Have you guys seen any of that?
I have not.
Is that the one of Cuba Gooding Jr. as OJ?
Yeah, it's actually, believe it or not, because I saw it, I'm like, this is probably going to be comical.
Yeah, it looked bad. I'm not going to lie.
But it's not bad. I mean, you're not learning anything you didn't already know, but it was, I'm not going to say it's great or anything, but it's entertaining. It's worth watching.
Who's playing Johnny Cochran?
Courtney B. Vance.
They should have gotten the guy who played Jackie Charles from Seinfeld.
Oh, God, that would have been perfect, wouldn't it?
So this is actually the perfect segue, Greg, for something I wanted to discuss tonight.
All right, cool.
So, O.J. Simpson trial, that whole thing, one of the most, if not the most, televised events in history. Yeah. I mean, on so many networks, 24-hour coverage.
Oh, it was ridiculous.
One of the first major events of the cable era that was like so profound. It was almost defining.
Yeah.
So, yet for all of that footage, and I mean, we're talking weeks and months of years of material that if you played end to end would go 80 times to the moon.
Yeah.
They decide to make a fucking movie about it when it was just like, dude, no, what are we doing? We got enough here to make like an incredible documentary here, like a powerful, visceral, real documentary that shows the real people doing real stuff, and it would work. It would be so amazing. But it's like, no, we're gonna hire some crappy actors and some low budget guys to make a mediocre television series. Mm-hmm. Whereas, I feel so robbed of that. Now, granted, there have already been like a 30 for 30 that was sort of about OJ, and there's been probably any number of documentaries on OJ Simpson, but I just feel like the show aspect of it cheapens the original event when there's no excuse for it. I can understand if you want to make a television series about like the Salem witch trials because there were any fucking cameras back then. Okay, that was back in 1800s or whatever, 1700s,
1600s,
yeah,
whatever. There's some people back then, they did some stuff. So now, we just in the last few weeks we saw over the last, I guess, a month or two, we witnessed in part the magic fairy tale story of John Scott as he went from nobody hockey player who sucks and beats people up to kind of becoming this running joke who then evolves into this feel-good story where the joke becomes serious and everybody kind of is rallying behind him and everyone says, oh, yeah, he's in the All-Star game. Yeah.
And then he and then
nefarious NFL. Or NHL. Sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say, Mike? No,
I was just going to say, and then no, go on, because
then disaster struck. The NHL orchestrates an evil trade to send him to the AHL, banishing him, nary to the end of the ass of Canada. He will not see the light of day. I'm sorry, Newfoundland.
It's okay, St. John's. I still love you.
Yeah, we're not just going to trade you. We're trading you basically to North American Siberia.
Pretty much, yep.
Stuffing you deep into the anus of the
continent,
the icy north. Yeah, so
it's got its own time zone, by the way.
That's how far away we're sending you.
And yet, for all this, they finally succumb to the public pressure and the negative publicity, and John Scott gets this magical, mediocre All-Star Game thing where he gets voted he's captain and he gets voted MVP, and he takes $1 million check, and he's at kids and all this stuff.
That's what I was going to say. The best part about the All-Star Game was Gary Bettman having to hand John Scott a cartoonish novelty check for $1 million.
So all this happens, and we saw it play out on coverage from ESPN and in numerous television programs and YouTube and online and NHL.com and all these places. 1 million cameras with 1 million camera phones saw it all happen, and man, what a unique moment that was for anyone watching that All-Star Game. So you know what we do? We'd better get a movie made about it as soon as possible, because this thing is fading out of the public eye by the hour. So as of noon today, I guess, rumors have already started circulating that, and I guess they already confirmed it with John Scott, that people are contacting them about making the movie. And they have been for a while now.
Seriously?
Mm-hmm. And so
Mark Wahlberg as John Scott. Make it happen, Hollywood.
Oh, he's not big enough, is he? John Scott's a pretty big guy, isn't he?
Yeah, Sylvester Stallone played, a professional boxer.
It doesn't matter.
That's true, yeah.
It doesn't matter. They doesn't,
but it does matter, because you've got what's his name, Cuba Gooding Jr. playing OJ, and Cuba Gooding Jr. might be 5'7" if he's selling on a phone book.
Here's the difference between. You're comparing. First of all, let's just take a moment to realize that we're comparing OJ Simpson, whose face was on the cover of Time magazine and is well known. His mugshot is infamous. Like, people know that face.
Yeah.
From commercials and magazines and movies and television. And John Scott is just a guy, and he certainly wasn't having his mugshot or his face detailedly and professionally lit on any sort of publication, at least that I'm aware of. For all I know, they probably had his fucking face on the cover of Sports Illustrated this month, and I look like an idiot.
No, they didn't.
But like John Scott, he could be anybody. They could basically just cast any sort of big, craggy white guy to be John Scott and have it, tell their magical tale. But the thing is, though, John Scott isn't some dolt either. Like, he's not like an embarrassingly uncomfortable speaker to where it's like, oh, God, like we shouldn't have him, sit down for an interview to describe this experience. It's like, no, you could absolutely have John Scott sit down and be interviewed for the whole experience and stuff like that.
He seems to be, at least sharp enough to diss Jeremy Roenick in the moment.
Yeah, he sure did.
And if you read the piece in the Players Tribune, I think.
Yes, it was.
Very well written, extraordinarily well done, and that article really kind of set a few wheels in motion to ensure that he participated, and that they gave it a very positive spin on things. But he also cast the NHL in a pretty bad light.
Well, he basically said that the NHL tried to guilt him out of the All-Star game. Like, would your children be proud of you?
Yeah.
Did they really?
Yes, they did.
Wow, that's just terrible.
Read the article, Greg. It's extraordinarily well done.
I get that it was a kind of a joke campaign to get him in the game, but once he was there, would your children be proud of you? That's just a terrible thing to say to the guy. I'm glad he went out and won the MVP. I think it's awesome.
Well, the fans voted him to MVP as a write-in candidate.
Yeah, but he scored a couple goals though, didn't he?
Sure.
Yeah, he got 2 goals, yeah.
Well,
yeah, but it's the.
Well, look, I'm not trying to say the guy's like I was going to use Patrick Kane, but that's probably a bad idea.
Yeah.
But
Blake Wheeler.
Okay, yeah, he's not Blake Wheeler. Then who is, right? But anyway,
yeah, I just don't like the idea. Like, I don't like the idea of doing something so quickly after the fact. So it kind of reminds me of 9/11, for example. What a fun moment to harken back to here. That's obviously sarcasm. So 9/11, horrible, once in a lifetime horrific event, which people gathered around their televisions to watch, and it was one of the most surreal things to experience through a television or computer screen ever. And for some people's lives, that's going to be the tops, like as far as most incredible things you may ever see.
Yeah.
And the experience was, talked about ad nauseum, 24-hour coverage, again, just like OJ, just beaten into the ground for years to the point of numerous conspiracy documentaries and and hundreds of television programs. So what does Hollywood do within, I think 3 years of 9/11 is they made at least 2 9/11 movies, one of which was about United 93. It was called United 93, I think.
Yeah.
And then the other one was World Trade Center with fucking Nicolas Cage as a firefighter.
They had him in the really bad porn stash. Yeah.
It was too. I mean, United 93 was whatever, but it was almost just like I sat there. I first the life I saw both of them. I don't know what the hell's wrong with me, but I sat.
Well, I thought United 93 was actually pretty well done.
That's okay. In retrospect, yes. If you watch it now, it's obviously it's not a bad little movie. But the problem I had with it was I remember I was waiting in line to buy tickets and I'm just like I just saw this. Like I saw it on TV. And
right.
We're not talking about Pearl Harbor here. We're talking about 2001. Like this is what 2003, 4?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, to go to 9/11 that quickly, I thought was really kind of in poor taste.
Although I'll tell you who called that. My history teacher, because I remember I was grade 8 when that happened.
Sure.
And the whole thing happened right before history class that day. And so we just spent the entire class watching it on TV as it happened.
Wow.
And I forget who, but some kid talked about they're going to make a movie about this in 20 years. And my teacher just kind of scoffed without even taking his eyes off the TV and said, they're going to make a movie about this in a year.
Yeah, next week.
And then they had 2 within the next 3. So
weren't there some shitty made-for-TV movies too about it, or am I remembering it wrong?
There was a shitty Robert Patterson movie that got 9/11 right at the end.
Yeah, that was.
What was that called?
I don't. You have to look it up. But the 2 movies I was thinking of both came out in 2006. By the way, so 5 years after 9/11.
Wow, United 93 didn't come out until 5 years later.
Yeah,
it seems like it was sooner than that.
But that's the other thing is they both came out in 2006. So it was kind of like, oh my God, what? Why is this? Which was also conveniently right around the time when, some of the Gulf War kind of stuff was coming to a head, or Gulf War, whatever we're calling that.
The Iraq War, I think is what people call it.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I haven't listened. I may be killing the lead here, but I was very pleasantly surprised to see that there was a politics show special from the Basically team.
Yeah, we had fun with that.
I was going to listen to it here. I'm probably going to listen to it at work tomorrow. How did it go? How'd you like it?
I thought we did a good job.
We're probably going to be doing more as the campaigns start to sort themselves out.
We didn't really do politics so much as we talked about the primaries and stuff. Okay. We didn't get into the right versus left type thing or anything like that. So that was probably smart. But
that could be weird, awkward in do what politics does and poison relationships. But but yeah, I was like, oh, there you go. I like that. I like that idea of bringing that conversation to the table. I really am not comfortable ever talking about politics, ever. But for some reason, I work with people who just love to talk about it.
Oh, it drives me. I used to. Well, now I'm not. But in Ohio, there were people that the minute you ran into them, the first thing I want to talk about. Do you see what Obama did, or this or that? It's like, oh my God, please just stop.
Oh, you want to talk about Ohio and politics, Greg? When we were talking about the Republican primary process, I mentioned how John Kasich seemed to have emerged as a potential, dark horse. And I figure, Greg's from Ohio. Maybe he would know something about Kasich. He could provide some insight into the guy's track record in Ohio. Sure. And Greg's like, oh, don't look at me. I have no idea.
he goes, so Greg, what about John Kasich? I'm like, I don't know anything about him.
You're from Ohio.
Honestly, I don't want to take up too much time with this, but I got so knee-deep into politics from 2000 until basically 2008 that I just had to step away. It was just one of those things where I was turning into one of those people that I can't stand, where that's all I talked about. And I just said, you know what? I gotta go away. I can't do this anymore. So that's why I don't know much. I think he got elected in 2008, if I'm not mistaken. And I just quit following it. I mean, I follow the primaries because I'm a political strategy junkie. and I enjoy that kind of stuff. But the rest of it, I don't know the first thing about it anymore, and I haven't been happier since. I tell you.
This there is a strange I was as I watch these things that just a lot of it reminds me of cutting a pro wrestling promo or something. Like I kind of hearken to that a little bit. Like obviously these are politicians who are extremely well spoken and make a career from.
And then what? Oh, and then Donald Trump. Yeah.
It is such a bizarre year for this. Too, I don't know. But we've covered a lot of weird ass ground today, haven't we? Jesus.
Yeah, that's okay. That's what we do here.
You want to talk about politics and pro wrestling? I'll bring Donald Trump back into that. You could probably, if you looked at just Donald Trump and Jeb Bush, Donald Trump's campaign almost seems like a very mean wrestling promo directed at Jeb Bush, and Jeb Bush, bless his heart, has been absolutely devastated and destroyed by this campaign.
Yeah, because you had Chris Christie took out Marco Rubio in that Republican debate a week or so ago.
What a babyface turn that was! That was fantastic.
And yeah. That was Chris Christie coming out with booze from the steel chair and then suddenly hitting the bad guy over the head with it.
But we talked about it on the political show. I said it sounded to me like that Christie knew he was going to end his campaign, and somebody came to him and said, "You're the designated hit guy. You're going to take out Rubio." And then I heard somebody else on the radio say the same thing, and I'm like, so I wasn't nuts. I think that's exactly what happened. I think Christie knew he was going to stop
the hit job,
so he became the designated hatchet guy. You're going to take Rubio's legs out from under him, and from what I understand, I didn't see it, but from what Mike and Jack were telling me, he did a pretty good job of it.
It's surreal.
It's surreal, and then look, I don't like Marco Rubio, but I felt bad for him the third time he uttered his canned statement.
I would pull it up. It's like 4 minutes long, but I don't want to play the whole thing. But I mean, basically what happens is that the robot inside of Marco Rubio, the circuitry breaks,
and he can only repeat the one sound file that he's got queued up.
Like talking point .wave keeps playing on. So, like, he says one thing, it's really this clearly canned speech. Rubio calls him out, and so then Marco Rubio says, or I'm sorry, Christie calls him out. Rubio then responds with blah, blah, blah. Oh, here's my speech again. And then he gets called out again. He says it 4 times.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And the audience is, like, in shock. It's like, they can't believe. It's like, wait, is he saying it again?
And by the third time I'm watching this, I'm like, oh, Marco, stop. I feel for you. Like, I don't.
Cringeworthy.
I'm like, it's like he's already dead. Just
it was that bad, huh?
Yeah.
Because I thought I heard one clip of it, and Christie I don't remember exactly what they said, but Christie just lit him up, and I went, wow. That was you just don't see that too often in what's supposed to be these debates, because it's all, basically it's all sound bites and pre-prepared stuff. But he just took his knees out. I was like, man, that's amazing.
The other thing I thought, this came out today that was interesting. This advice for anybody considering running for president of the free world: don't tweet a picture of your gun with your name on it.
Nope.
That was Jeb Bush's smart idea today.
That's why I brought up Jeb Bush, because this is such a pathetic attempt at pandering.
Exactly.
Sad. Yeah.
And that's why I brought up Trump, because Trump has absolutely destroyed Jeb Bush in this campaign. And in fact, if I didn't know any better, I'd say this was entirely personal on Trump's part to humiliate Jeb Bush, and the fact that he just might get the nomination is just, a bonus. But
the whole thing has been weird. It's been a little more weird on the Republican side, but the whole thing has just been strange. Mm-hmm. I don't remember ever seeing a primary season like this before, where it's just so much bizarre stuff happening. It's amazing.
I'll tell you what, Greg. The reason is I just discussed this with my friend the other day. This is the first time, at least I can remember it. I mean, obviously I haven't been around that long, but like there is a incredible divide on each party side. So on the left, you have basically two like-minded kind of groups, but they're utterly and violently divided between two candidates.
Yep.
And I mean, it's like 50-50. Like, it's dangerously, perilously close. Mm-hmm. And then on the right, you have a much larger field of people, but none of them are endearing. Not a single one of them. And then you got the crazy, just basically a media terrorist in Donald Trump, who is just sort of this wild card rogue who's just like, here's my dick, I'm going to put it on the podium, and if you don't like it, you can suck my ass. I will do whatever the fuck I want. I'll blow up the White House. What are you going to do about it? Fuck you. You're cool. I'm Trump. Eat my ass.
And then he goes up 5 percentage points.
Yeah, and the money pours in, and his poll numbers go up. It's amazing.
Like he could do anything. He could do anything he wants, and it's going to go over. Because there's a lot of people who are just like, I don't care what he says. All I know is that he represents the worst, or he represents the breaking of the establishment. And they go, that's just invaluable. That's chaos. That's what I want.
Jack, basically a Geek Show co-host and the guy that Greg and I did the political show with.
Yeah.
He considers himself a right-of-center voter, and he's fully on board with Donald Trump. And I asked him about it, like, well, what in particular about Donald Trump, what makes him your guy? And he goes, honestly, the fact that he's pissing off the Republican establishment.
Sure.
And it's just sort of this thing where people on the left, you mentioned, Andy, you've got these two groups of people who ideologically aren't all that far apart, but it's just almost a question of the personality more so than the policy. In some ways, on, for example, gun control, I think Sanders is to the right of Hillary, but it's just it's crazy. There's so much passion and anger being directed at what amounts to little to no difference. But on the right, I think you've got a disconnect, and it's not even between one or two candidates, but it's between Republican establishment and the conservative base. And I think there are a lot of people on the conservative side who are just so fed up with the way that the Republican Party has managed itself for the past 8 years that they're willing to support anyone who's saying they're going to come in and clean house. And currently Donald Trump is that guy.
Yeah, they just want to break the cycle. There's a lot of disenfranchisement, and I understand that. But speaking of which, and I wanted to kind of close things out here. I don't know how much longer you guys want to go. But let's just say I send a couple messages, and to my everlasting regret, I am able to sit down with Tank and do an interview with him.
Okay.
What should I ask him?
Wow.
Throw me some questions. I mean, obviously, part of what I would like to discuss with him is getting to know him. But obviously, there's not going to be a lot of follow-up communication. So
I'd ask him. I guess the biggest thing politics, I think, is something that you have to broach. I don't see how you couldn't. But
right,
I would say I'd try to ask him questions that basically get to know who he is outside of his, quote unquote board persona. So outside of politics, even outside of sports, what's he into? What shows does he like? What for work? How does he like his job? Does he want to keep doing that? Is there something else he'd like to do? I don't know. Just really try to get behind the Mets fan, the extreme Tea Party Mets fan who tells bad jokes. Because there's got to be more
behind the avatar. Sorry,
there's got to be more to who he is than just that. And I don't know.
I'd be curious to know what kind of music he likes. That's a easy dumb question, but sure. I would be very interested to find out.
Ted Nugent.
I'm sure.
The thing I wanted to ask him, and I really want to know the truth behind this, in one of the greatest exposés in internet history, is that how have you kept up being the admiral this whole time, and what'll happen now that you're exposed? And I just feel like it would be such an amazing adventure if I could get him on the phone, and he's trying to keep up this nasally kind of Tank voice, and then he coughs or something, and then I hear the admiral's voice. oh my God, you're the same. No,
it's been a long time.
That would be hysterical. I'm sorry. That would be the greatest thing in the history of the internet, I think.
I mean, I can't even fathom it. It would be so amazing. I would retire. I would just retire after that. Nothing in my life could ever be better.
You just publish the episode with like one of those tabloid style pictures of Tank with like the big
side by side.
No, just a big picture of Tank with like the red text across, just as like exposed.
New York Post style, like
yeah.
Well, say you got to what else? What other shows do you guys have coming up soon? You guys obviously aren't doing the football show. I'd imagine that's done for a little while.
Yeah, we're done with that until next season. I think you guys are bringing the Geek Show back at some point, aren't you, Mike?
Yeah, we're going to actually. We've talked about it a few times. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to take the Geek Show and expand its purview. We kind of ran into the problem of some weeks there just really wasn't much to talk about. We kind of ran into the problem the LogoCast had.
Sure.
And so,
yeah.
And so what we've decided is it's just going to be more of a general show of everything that doesn't fall under the basically a sports show or basically a football show banner.
Okay.
So the geek stuff is going to be front and center, but we're also going to touch on almost anything else. The paranormal show specials, for example, are going to stop, but we're just going some weeks on basically a sports show. We're just going to talk about paranormal crap, or some weeks we might even talk politics. So it'll be so it's just going to be more of a general sit down, and we're going to bullshit about whatever happens to be on our mind.
This is what happened to the History Channel, Mike. We discussed this. You can't cheapen your material just because it's lacking for content. I mean, you gotta learn from the mistakes of the past. Am I right?
But I'm just saying, when you do the paranormal show, I would never beg to be a guest, except that I'm going to beg to be a guest when you do a paranormal show. You know how I like I told you before, I don't believe in any of that stuff, and I believe in all of it. Anyway, so are we done, I guess, then, or what?
I don't know. Yes, I have nothing, unfortunately, at the moment to promote, but I would appreciate if people stop by the one thread, the Behind the Avatar thread, I guess, and gave their 2 cents, because obviously that's not something I'm going to be promoting terribly much else anywhere else, because nobody else would give a shit.
And from that point forward, we sort of stumbled to the end of the show, but we never properly ended it, so I'm going to step in right now and take the opportunity to put a proper ending on this episode of Basically a Sports Show. You know the routine by now. Follow us on Twitter at Basically Sports. Check out all the old episodes on the website, basicallyasportshow.com. We are available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, and the YouTubes. And you can also find us on Facebook. Thanks again to Andy for sitting in for Zach this week. And with that, we'll see you next time right here on Basically a Sports Show. Thanks for tuning in.
What that means.